Hey everyone, my name is Michelle. Welcome to Realization Hub. I am an intuitive counselor, energy healer, astrologer, and channeler, and I teach people how to manage their energy and develop their intuition so that they can feel calm and clear and balanced, as well as just navigate their lives with lots of clarity and empowerment. So if you're ever interested in a free class, I do have a free class coming up this month. It's going to be on Thursday, October 30th. Please sign up. I'll leave the link in the description box for you. All right, let's go ahead and get started with today's energy update for the full moon in Aries. Now, what I want to share about how I deliver these messages is that I will be going back and forth between sharing the technical astrology and what it means, as well as working with my own intuition and the imagery and the energetic communication that's coming through about this full moon in Aries. So let's start with some details. The full moon in Aries is happening on Monday, October 6th, at 5:48 p.m. Hawaii time. So you can convert that to your own time zone. Okay, so this full moon is happening in Aries, and it's going to be at the 14th degree in Aries. So if you have any placements in Aries, your sun, moon, rising, or your personal placements or other placements, you'll want to look at the degrees in your chart. If you have a placement that is within 5 degrees of 14 degrees, between 9 and 19 degrees, this full moon is going to impact you very directly. Or if you have any placements in any cardinal signs, Capricorn, Libra, and Cancer, especially in that range of 9 degrees to 19 degrees. Let's talk about Aries. Aries is a fire sign. It's very active, extroverted, optimistic, and direct. It's a masculine energy. It tends to be more extroverted or expressed outwardly into the world. And it's a cardinal sign, which makes it a natural leader, where we have inspiration that sparks action, where we have a passion that sparks a desire, where we initiate action on some level. So this Aries energy is well known for being brave because oftentimes we have to move through our challenges, move through obstacles, and move into new unknown territory. And so we need bravery. Now, Aries is ruled by Mars. It can be very direct energy. And there's a lot going on with this full moon. This full moon is surprisingly deep and complex, given that Mars rules this full moon and is in Scorpio. You see Mars over here at 10 degrees in Scorpio, and that makes, Mars illuminated or highlighted during this full moon, which brings out a very deep, intuitive, emotional, complex, often misunderstood energy that we're dealing with. So another thing I want to mention about this full moon is that a full moon is happening in Libra season. A full moon is always in opposition to the sun. You can see the sun over here. It's in Libra at 14 degrees, which means this full moon is going to balance us out when it comes to our self and our individual self. Libra is all about fairness and balance and harmony in our relationships and being aware of the other person. And oftentimes, if we are too extreme with Libra or we're fall out of balance with that Libran energy, we can see the shadows of Libra, which can be like people pleasing and indecision and avoiding conflict. And so that's when we need more Aries. And this is a full moon that helps us bring in more of that Aries energy to overall help us balance us out in Libra season. This full moon is definitely going to be illuminating something about ourselves as an individual. And then here we have Ceres. Ceres is a goddess of fertility and agriculture and kind of these themes that fall under anything that a mother might go through, like grieving the loss of a child, or um, nurturing their children. And so this asteroid here tends to bring up a lot of themes of food and nurturing and how we nurture ourselves. And so with the full moon in Aries, conjunct Ceres here, we are bringing a lot of awareness to something that we need on a personal level, how to nurture ourselves on a personal level. We have the full moon in a wide conjunction with both Eris, the goddess of chaos and discord, as well as Chiron, the wounded healer. So this full moon is definitely going to be bringing up some old trauma, old wounds, old patterns up to the surface, possibly regarding our ability to assert ourselves in relationships, work through conflict in relationships, be confident in relationships, just become, issues of confidence and of being able to assert yourself or be able to take care of your own needs in relationships. And yeah, we might have to speak up, and I'll say a lot more about that soon. But with Eris here, we might have to disrupt the pattern. We might have to shake up the pattern within ourselves, or a pattern that's playing out in our lives, in order to, help this wounding release on some level. Or maybe some chaos or disruption, or a form of advocating for yourself in more of a louder way helps to have a release energetically. But one of the things standing out to me the most about this full moon in Aries is that it's very potent. It's definitely going to bring up wounds to the surface for us to release, and bringing a lot of awareness to how we need to nurture ourselves now, and any form of conflict that's coming up between us as an individual and how we also show up in relationships. Now, we do have Neptune in Aries. It's retrograde at 0 degrees. And so this energy, because it's in Aries, is also going to be even more heightened. And Neptune is a planet that influences our vision, our dreams, our collective experience, our spiritual side, our creative side. And it can be very vast. It can dissolve things, and it can bring up both dreams and fantasies and vision, but it can also bring up delusion and illusion and lots of confusion, right? And so when I'm looking at the energy of this full moon, not only is it going to be bringing up kind of a wound that we need to clean up, or like a healing that we need to clean up, something that we need to heal and clean up to the surface. But a lot of this release is what seems like clouds or waves of unconsciousness, releasing, that have been keeping us from having clarity about our particular needs, how to nurture them, and how to show up differently so that we get our needs nurtured in a new way. So intuitively, this example is kind of coming through, kind of like a story about this energy of this full moon. And it's kind of like if you had a little boy sitting in a classroom with a teacher, and he's having a really hard time taking an exam. And he's trying, he's not doing well, he's failing, he's going into resistance, something is not working, right? And then he finally gets up and he's like, I'm going to ask the teacher for help. He goes to the teacher and he's like, can you please help me with this exam? And the teacher starts laughing, because the teacher's like, I'm sorry, the exam is the one thing I can't help you with. You just have to take the exam yourself. And if you pass it, you pass it. If you don't, you fail. And that's just the rules. Right. And so the little boy feels defeated. He goes back. He, tries to take the exam. He can't really finish the exam. He fails the exam, and he has now this wound of confidence. I can't take the exam on my own. The exam is challenging on some level. It's not working for me and no one's helping me and I'm just stupid or I'm just bad at this, right? And now there's a wound. There's this wound or this pattern of not being able to receive help, not being able to receive guidance, not being able to receive the right kind of nurturing that that little boy needed. And then we go watch that little boy, and what his life is like outside of school. And maybe he's an incredible baseball player. And maybe he actually has a sole purpose to come into this lifetime and be like a professional baseball player. And academics isn't really something that he was meant to strive in long term, but more so a part of his childhood that he has to move through, to get to his adult life, signing up for teams, being the best player, getting scholarships, playing college baseball, going into the professional leagues, things like that. And so let's say he has this gift with sports. Maybe he's really gifted with baseball and no one's really acknowledging that. They're all basing his worth and what he needs all on his problem around learning. He's not doing good in school, so he isn't that great. He doesn't have that much value. He's, and this perpetuates on a relational level, this issue of self-esteem, this issue of confidence, this issue of I'm not good at life. I'm not good at this. And so I'm not good at anything. I don't, something like that. And so if we were to rewind and say, wow, look at this wound playing out, this kid has a purpose to play baseball, but no one's validating that purpose. No one can see that spiritual purpose. They're just basing his success based on whether he's good at taking exams and passing exams or not. And if we were to rewind and go back to where all of this started, and that little boy knew how to articulate this, to other people. Every time he goes up to the teacher, can I have your help? She just says, no, these are the rules, right? But what if that little child went up to the teacher and knew exactly what he needed? What if he went up to the teacher and said, hey, I'm dyslexic. I can't read the questions on the exam. All I need you to do is come over, sit next to me, and help me read the questions and make sure I understand the questions so I can do the exam. And maybe that's all he needed. He just needed someone to come sit next to him and read him the questions out loud so he could hear it, so that he could understand the questions, so that he could pass the exam. He wasn't stupid in the first place. He just needed support, right? But because he didn't know what he needed, he couldn't get those needs met and he couldn't assert himself. And it ended up being a wound of confidence around him being stupid the rest of his life, when really he has a wonderful intelligence around his strength, his muscles, his body, his hand, eye, brain, coordination. And he's really just meant to be a professional baseball player, right? And so this is kind of the way this full moon is playing out with us as individuals. There's something within us that needs healing. And maybe at the time in which this wound was formed, we could not articulate what we needed. We could not articulate how to nurture ourselves, how to get what we needed. And so, our circumstances failed. Our authority figures failed us on some level in our ability to address those special needs and get those needs met. And so in this full moon, what we're illuminating is the pattern. We're illuminating Chiron, okay, the wounded healer. We're illuminating the old pattern, the old trauma, the old wound, and we're saying, not this pattern again. And it's probably something like something that you've dealt with, before from the past, maybe from childhood, maybe from maybe later on in your life. And then we have this opportunity to start asking our questions like, is this really like true? Is this really our truth? Are we really stupid? Are we really bad? Are we really, you know, not good at communication? Are we really this or that? And you start questioning the wound itself. You start questioning the pattern. And then you start to ask yourself some different questions like, maybe I just have some special needs. Maybe I need to approach this relational conflict, this challenge, this obstacle, um, in a way that is special for me. Maybe I have special needs around how to work through this energy or this pattern with other people. You know, just like that little boy just needed someone to read him the questions verbally instead of trying to read, the questions, visually. He's able to pass those tests with flying colors, right? And so when we make these small tweaks around what we need and how to nurture ourselves, especially our special needs and our sensitive needs with Neptune here in Aries, we have the opportunity to articulate to other people what our truth is and what we need. And so this is where I'd like to point out that we have a yod with Mercury. You can see that there's two in conjunctions, one from Uranus, one from Neptune, and pointing at Mercury. These two are in a sextile here. Neptune and Uranus are in a sextile, creating a finger of God. It's pointing at Mercury. That means in this full moon, we are fated to embody this energy of Mercury. That means in this full moon, we are fated to embody this energy of Mercury and Scorpio at 0 degrees. And so we could be going into new territory in our lives, new spiritual territory, a new spiritual cycle, a new creative beginning with Neptune at 0 degrees in Aries, and we're reworking something there. We're getting more clarity about it, and we're probably not clear about something. We probably don't know what we need. We probably don't know what's bothering us. We probably don't know how to work through an issue. We definitely have like a heightened spiritual fog at this time. And then we have Uranus, the planet of change, disruption, and chaos and unpredictability. How can we embrace change in our communication, especially so that we can communicate, what it is we need, especially to help us heal, to help us grow, and to help us change something so that we can learn something new, so that we can strategize, so that we can innovate something, so that we can get our needs met, so that we can heal. So this is, a yod. It's pointing at Mercury. Mercury's in Scorpio at 0 degrees. Mercury in Scorpio is deep. It's a deep thinker, especially with a square here to Pluto. This full moon, there might be a lot of intense thinking, a lot of deep, intense thinking. At worst, shadow work coming up on a psychological level, your inner shadows that you have to work through, fixating, obsessing about something, or just going through a very intense process on a very deep level, a lot of deep, intense thinking. Or maybe it could even be someone who's diving in deep into a topic and just going on like a weekend binge, learning something new, and just being intensely hyper focused about learning something new. And it's just intense, it's deep, you've dived into it, you're obsessing about it, and then it's over. It doesn't last long because Mercury is a planet that moves pretty quickly. And so this intensity around our thinking will be for a few days rather than weeks. But with Mercury here in a trine to Hygeia, Hygeia is the goddess of miraculous healing. She's in Cancer, which has to do with our emotional security, our family, our ancestry, our healing, our intuition, the people that we love the most. There is a very supportive energy here where we can heal something around our communication, our thinking and our processing, the way we translate things, right? And so that's what I really sense about this full moon, is that there's an issue with translating something. Like when you were a kid, it's like you translated an issue or an obstacle or a challenge in a way that felt really defeating and wounded and painful and hurt, right? But now we have the opportunity to kind of unravel that and look at it differently and translate it differently. Like, oh, it's not that I'm stupid. I just learn verbally, or visually. This is the way I learn. I learn like this, and so it's not that like I'm debilitated or that I'm weird or that I suck at this. It's just like I have to learn it this way. I have to do it that way. With Uranus here, we might be changing our communication. We might, I mean, we could say things that are, you know, out of normal. You want to be very conscious of your communication at this time. Because Mercury and Scorpio can be intense, can be an intense communicator, it can be very telepathic too, and psychic, and so you want to, be conscious of your words at this time. Your communication could feel a little bit too suppressed or overexpressed. You could be saying things that are wild and unhinged, or you could be like totally suppressed at this time. Or you could be communicating something that's very unrealistic and like idealistic and like kind of coming from a place of fantasy or even manipulation when, it's not like really grounded in reality. And right, so we have Mercury and Scorpio that helps us investigate, that helps us strategize, that helps us speak our truth, that helps us, get to the bottom of things. Think of a detective, like in your own mind, you're going to be thinking about this relational dynamic between you as an individual and your patterns that are coming up that might be a type of rebalancing you need to do in your relationships, and how to communicate that, how to retranslate that, how to dissolve the wound, clean up, the energy, give yourself a healing, go through a healing process so that you can communicate differently, so you can innovate your communication or change something about the way you're translating something, ultimately healing. So this full moon is definitely a healing full moon. It could definitely be tender because it is bringing wounds up to the surface. So it might be one of those full moons where, maybe you're going into some new territory and you're sensitive and you have special needs and you have old wounding around it, and like you need to work through that very consciously. You need to like really think that out, really um, investigate what it is that you need and how to nurture yourself so that you can heal, and grow and continue to grow and continue to learn. Looking at this full moon, I think the beautiful thing about this full moon is that it is in a trine with Vesta. And Vesta is like the priestess of like a sacred flame. And so it reminds me of like our spiritual purpose, the type of spiritual passion we have, the passion that lives in our hearts, what we're meant to, the flame that burns within us, that is our passion, our spiritual passion, a sacred passion that we're here to explore, that we're here to expand on, right? And so there's some, purpose that's being illuminated, some kind of sacred fire, some kind of sacred alchemy, some kind of sacred inspiration possibly, or healing going on that's supporting who you really need to be, like who you really need to be as an individual, that maybe was being distorted or masked or covered up by a wound, right? And so back to the story with the little boy, he had a gift to play baseball, and maybe his purpose was to really come into an expertise around his physical functioning and his strength and his body and like his coordination, his mind body coordination in that lifetime. And so being a professional baseball player was his purpose, right? And so when you remember that, when you bring that to illumination in your life, you can say, well, everything else makes sense. It makes sense why I'm not necessarily concerned about this or that, or this is not my priority, or I'm not good at that because I'm good at this, and this is what I need to do with my gift, right? And so this full moon could illuminate that as well. I want to go back to Mars in Scorpio because this full moon is ruled by Mars, and Mars will be home in Scorpio. And so it does well there, it functions well there, which is going to add some strength to this full moon. So even though we have some wounds coming up to the surface, we have all the information that we need to work through any challenges. We have that ability to investigate. We have that ability to be psychic, to be intuitive, to be deep, to be complex, to dig deep and find our truths, to heal, to go through a death or rebirth process, to transform. Scorpio is like the energy alchemist. It can take something and alchemize it into something, different. And so this wound, we have like a healing alchemy going on during this full moon. Mars is in a trine with Hygeia, the goddess of miraculous healing. And so we are energized with this miraculous healing energy to alchemize something. And what's most challenging about that is that, this Mars in Scorpio is in a square with Pallas Athena in Aquarius. And so this would show us that there's a type of conflict or challenge between the intellectual side of us that wants to bring knowledge and wisdom and strategy towards, winning, towards, accomplishing our goals in some way. That intellectual side of us that might have, a type of vision or really unique way of thinking. Maybe we have some beliefs about something, but they're really fixed. They're really like, we're really stubborn in those beliefs. And maybe those beliefs are different and unique than most people's beliefs. And that's in conflict with Mars and Scorpio. It's a water sign. It's more emotional. It's more intuitive. With Mars there, it's very strategic. And so we might have that in conflict with our own emotional and intuitive kind of strategies. Something might be in conflict with one another, and we have to integrate both our innovative vision and beliefs and intellectual kind of perspective on things, our intellectual strategy with our intuitive and emotional strategies. Another thing I want to mention is that before this full moon and during this full moon, Venus is going to be in a conjunction with the South Node. And Venus is a sign that represents our relationships. And so this energy is also, in a way, in the spotlight right now, simply because the sun is in Libra. We are in Libra season. So what Venus is doing is going to be extra important to us right now as well. And so this is something that's also kind of being very illuminated at this time. Now, Venus in Virgo is at its fall here. It just means that it doesn't have everything it really needs to function optimally here. Venus, the planet, is all about beauty and harmony and values and love and relationships and money and aesthetics. And when it's in Virgo, it can be more critical, perfectionistic, detail-oriented, persnickety kind of vibe. And so whenever you have that critical energy in a relationship, it can sometimes feel like it's breaking down a relationship more than it's building a relationship. Especially with Virgo, it can be very much like just on the tiniest little details, like nitpicking other people about the tiniest little details, right? And then we have this conjuncting the South Node. The South Node in Virgo is, where we're moving away from. The South Node represents our karmic past. It represents our gifts, our wisdom, but also what we've outgrown, what we're leaving behind, and kind of like a spiritual territory that we need to release. And so with Venus so close to the South Node, we could be in a release related to our relationships, and especially patterns in our relationships that we've outgrown. Being too critical, perfectionistic, picking at all the details, not seeing the bigger picture. Always needing everything to be perfectly planned out and in order instead of just going with the flow and trusting the process. And so with Venus here conjunct in the South Node, we're doing quite an energy update, in our relationships where we're releasing that old stuff. With Venus here in the South Node, it's also in opposition to the North Node, which means whatever we're releasing here around Venus is going to help us move towards more growth and new growth, growth that helps us overall balance out around trusting the process, letting things unfold, letting things be flowy and nonlinear and intuitive, that kind of rebalancing. And we also, have Venus in an opposition with Saturn. And so yeah, the critical energy could be loud right now. We could feel pretty restricted in our relationships on some level, or need to make boundaries, or maybe need to put in more work into our relationships, or show up with more commitment in our relationships. We really need to balance out our boundaries, our commitment, our responsibilities in our relationships, really balancing out the side of us that needs to go with the flow and trust the process, not have everything planned, and the part of us that needs to have everything planned and in control and everything perfect and everything improving all the time. We really have to balance that out. And we have an opportunity to go into our depths and do some shadow work with Lilith here in a sextile. Some of this stuff is deep and taboo inside of us. And we can find the hidden stuff and release it. And we also have a sextile with Jupiter, which really helps. This is where we can really go through an experience, draw on our philosophy and belief systems and benevolence and our sense of humor and our emotional security and emotional sensitivity, to support our relationships. And so even though there could be like a heightened critical energy in the air at this time, I would say, remember to have a sense of humor. Remember to be open to the broad experience, not just all the small details. And, draw on your wild feminine, nature to clear out the clutter, and to embody new boundaries, to show up more responsibly, to do the work in your relationships, and to trust the process overall. All right, so let's go over your rising sign and see where this full moon is falling in your own chart, in your own life. So for Aries Rising, this full moon is landing in your first house. This has to do with your personality, your identity, the way you see the world, your outlook on the world, and the way people see you, the way you present yourself. Even your physical well-being and health can be brought up to the surface at this time. And so there could be some wounds coming up to the surface around your outlook on life, or just your overall identity and personality, or physical health. And this could be coming up to the surface for you to go through a healing in. And it's just important for you to remember that with Mercury in your 8th house, with Mars in your 8th house, you could definitely be working through a lot of fears. And so I do recommend doing some form of writing and journaling, doing some form of solitude, taking space, writing, journaling, doing some, deep healing practices on your own. That would be good for you around this full moon. If you are a Taurus rising, then this full moon is going to be in your 12th house of rest and solitude and the unconscious and spirituality. The 12th house also marks endings and our karma. And so usually when you have a full moon in your 12th house, you will likely need to rest. This energy release is happening on a very subconscious level. It's happening on a very energetic, spiritual level. And you might not have a lot of energy. You might have to really withdraw from life, rest, take some solitude, be alone, sleep more, by taking more naps, by making sure you get extra sleep around this time. You could be doing a lot of work on the astral, just healing and releasing spiritually and subconsciously, but feeling maybe tired or just in need of a break or a need to be removed from the world. You have Mercury transiting your 7th house of relationships. And so this yod is pointing towards communication in your relationships. Maybe it has to do with finances, earned income, self-worth. Maybe it has to do with subconscious beliefs, things playing out that are unseen. Something that needs to be articulated, that might be tender, difficult to be articulated in your close one-on-one relationships. The need to do that, the need to speak your truth or possibly listen to someone else's truth in a close one-on-one relationship. Gemini Rising. Gemini Rising, your full moon in Aries is happening in your 11th house of friends, community, groups of people. And so there could be some friendship wounds coming up to the surface, wounds related to community, your dreams, your hopes, your dreams, and your ideals. And there might be some friendship wounds coming up to the surface around belonging, around asserting yourself in groups of people, around belonging in groups of people. And this is a healing around community and friendship. Possibly you join a new community, or you're ending something around community. Something comes to fruition around community and friends. But at the same time, it brings up some wounds to heal through. With Mercury in your 6th house of daily routines, there might be something that needs to be communicated about who you are, your identity, and friendships and community, and what you need on a daily basis. Maybe you need to communicate something about your health and your well-being. Maybe you're feeling depressed all the time. Maybe you're feeling angry all the time, or maybe you're getting sick a lot and you need to do something that's not just your standard health routines, but maybe something that, fills up your cup as well around friendship or community. that helps your overall well-being. For Cancer Rising, this full moon is happening in your 10th house of career. Something could be coming to fruition around your career, an ending around your career, or a release around your career. This could be illuminating something new, where you're going into uncharted territory in your career and you're lacking some confidence, you're feeling insecure, you're having hard times asserting yourself, amongst other professionals. There could be some wounding coming up to the surface around your career, your public reputation, um, your legacy. And this would be um, a healing around your identity that's coming through. You might have a purpose around work or routines that's important, your health, that's important. And Mercury will be in your 5th house of fun and joy and hobbies and entertainment and children. There could be something that you need to express. There could be some creative projects that you really need to articulate or think about or translate in some way. There may be overall changes happening in your subconscious that could be channeled into writing, speaking, teaching on a creative level. That could bring you more joy. That could bring you more fun. Okay. And then we have Leo Rising. This full moon in Aries is going to be in your 9th house of higher education and learning, foreign travel, long distance travel, as well as foreign cultures and your overall kind of wisdom and philosophy and beliefs. And so something could be illuminated around your beliefs, something around travel, long distance travel, or higher education, or just your overall outlook, worldly outlook on life. And you could have something illuminated around your perspective that feels a little bit off or wounded or old or stemming from like a pattern that isn't working for you. Maybe it's a pattern of seeing yourself a certain way, seeing yourself in the world a certain way that needs to go through a healing process. And Mercury is going to be in your 4th house of home and family. So something on an emotional level could be coming up that needs to be communicated. Something could be communicated relating to home or relating to your parents. Something might need to be articulated around your perspective, your overall outlook, friends, groups of people, dreams, ideals, and communicating, maybe what you're feeling, and or communicating with family. Virgo Rising, you're going to have this full moon in Aries in your 8th house. And so likely the themes coming up around this full moon are going to be around psychology, transformation, death and rebirth, shared resources, your intimacy, shared finances, investments, inheritance, real estate, taxes, debt. These are all topics that are in the 8th house. Something could be coming up around your shared finances. Something could be coming up to the surface for healing around your intimacy or your fears. And you could definitely be having an old pattern around intimacy, shared finances, the occult, and going through a healing process around that. Mercury is going to be in your 3rd house of communication. So it's going to be really important for you to have a conversation of some kind, possibly related to your career or your public reputation. And any and themes related to the eighth house, something that's going through transformation, some occult interests that you have, something to do with money, or working through your fears. Okay, and then we have Libra Rising. This Aries full moon is going to be in your seventh house of relationships, of one-on-one partnerships and marriage. Something could be illuminated around your marriage or your partnerships or your close relationships, or clients. And excuse me. And there might be a relationship that's going through something. Maybe there's kind of a wound coming up in the relationship, a type of insecurity that's coming up in a relationship. Maybe they have an insecurity with you. And you have to work through, a relationship issue, a relationship healing around this full moon. Really balance out your needs, with, your partner's needs and what they need. You are going to have Mercury in your second house. So this is going to bring up conversations related to earned income, self-worth, material possessions, spending money. Maybe there's some perspectives that have been repressed, some beliefs, some wisdom, some philosophy. Maybe there's a desire to travel more or learn more, go back to school. And yeah, maybe there's some misperception that's been occurring in your one-on-one relationships. Maybe there's, you thought maybe one of your relationships was presenting themselves a certain way. Maybe you were holding them and seeing them in a very idealistic way. And maybe something is coming through around a partnership that's a little bit different than what you thought it was. And well, maybe more sobering, maybe coming out of some form of disillusionment, maybe seeing things for what they are. Maybe there's a conversation around money that's occurring. Okay, and then we have Scorpio Rising. Scorpio Rising, this full moon is going to be happening in your sixth house of daily routines, employment, pets, and health. And so this could bring up an issue. This could bring an issue with your health up to the surface. You could see something that needs to be healed in your health or in your daily routines. There could be like something that comes up to the surface that gets illuminated around something that, needs to be investigated in your daily routines or put back in order or, released, or, there's something coming up that needs to go through healing. And, it could be something that was kind of unclear, and you're starting to get clarity about how to nurture yourself on a daily basis or in your health, or in your routines. And you might have to, work through some healing, some body healing, some healing around your health, some issues with your ability to initiate new things on a daily basis, have confidence on a daily basis, feel more secure, assert yourself on a daily basis. There's a lot of ways that that could show up. Mercury is going to be in your first house. And so you might be more talkative. You might have a lot of translation going on, a lot of insights and dreams and visions and, creativity, and needing to kind of bring it all together. It kind of feels like something's cooking in your brain. That you're talking about, that you're thinking about, that you're learning about. And yeah, it might be important for you to, just really go deep into that, really give yourself some space to go deep into that, some time out, some time alone, just to go deep into your inner thinking and, figure some things out. For Sagittarius rising, this Aries full moon is happening in your fifth house of pleasure and fun and joy and creativity and romance and self-expression and children. So with children, something could be illuminated with the child, maybe a wounded pattern with the child, something that has been unclear that, comes to more clarity, and you figure out some special needs that you need to address around your child. Or this could be applied to like a creative project, maybe something's coming to fruition around a creative project, but something is still kind of not working too well around it. And there's a need to refine it or figure out what it really needs so that it can be successful. But there's certainly like a lack of confidence or insecurity or ability to assert oneself around your creativity, around your self-expression, or in romance that might be surfacing. A healing could be happening through dating. A healing could be happening because of dating. Maybe you go on a date and it illuminates heartbreak or something, or an old pattern from an old relationship, and you start to clear it, you start to heal. Or maybe through a creative project, you start to heal. For Capricorn Rising, we have this full moon happening in your house of home and family. This full moon could be illuminating some form of challenge or conflict or desire related to your home and family or parents, or maybe even just on a private emotional level. And maybe something hasn't been very clear around home and family. Maybe something is been confusing. And this could illuminate the need to heal. Maybe around your own home and family, it's been hard to emotionally assert yourself, assert your emotional special needs, nurture your emotional special needs. And this could be a time when you speak up. You talk about your ideals, you talk about what you need on a daily basis, you talk about, what's confusing you, what's not clear for you. So there could be a lot of fog releasing around home, a lot of healing happening around home, and maybe coming into more emotional security around this full moon. Okay, and then we have Aquarius Rising. This Aries full moon is happening in your third house of communication. This could illuminate a conversation that you're having, or you might be thinking, learning, writing, or traveling locally around this full moon. And this third house also illuminates your extended family, your siblings, and your neighbors. And so themes related to that could come up to the surface. There could be like, a challenge or a desire that comes into fullness around this time, where you want to do something new in your communication, writing, or thinking. And yeah, maybe you hit like a roadblock, you know, um, around your communication. Maybe something needs to go through a type of refinement or articulation that hasn't been articulated before related to your career, your public reputation, and authority figures. Okay, and then we have Pisces Rising. This full moon in Aries is happening in your second house of earned income, material possessions, and self-worth. And I mean, this could definitely be a healing around your self-worth. This could also bring something to a conclusion or release related to an earned income stream or material possessions. It could be a time where you're spending more money. And there could be some wounds around money and spending and making money coming up to the surface, and self-worth coming up to the surface, that need to go through a healing process, or you might need to address something more specifically, something that you need to nurture. Maybe you need to buy yourself something. Maybe you need to, look for a new job. a new income stream. There's different ways that this can show up, but if you're thinking about yourself, your income, your self-worth, something that might need healing around that. All right, guys, it was so good to see you. Thank you so much for hanging out with me and tuning into the energy of this full moon in Aries. I would recommend, because it is tender, that you do take some time to process this. You do take some time. Make sure you're not too busy around this full moon. Make sure you have some me time so you can sit down and write, process something, communicate something, learn something, and really make sure you tune into, your special needs, what needs to be nurtured about you, and really maybe deconstructing an old way of thinking and articulating something that would be nourishing for you, especially if, there are challenges that arise that bring up old patterns. But overall, I see us going into some new territory. And in order to be prepared for that territory, we must release what's old and what's no longer supporting us and our purpose, and our desires and what we're manifesting. So this full moon is definitely supportive in that way. All right, everyone, if you are interested in astrology reading, an intuitive reading, and energy healing, if you want to sign up for my free class, you can find more information in my description box below. And I hope you have an easeful full moon in Aries, and I'll see you soon. Bye.